Hi, I'm B from Nectar Mechanics, and in today's video, we're going to be making my own original creation. It's the robot that time forgot. So why did I build this cosplay? Well, there was a cosplay competition going on at my local library, and I thought, that sounds really fun, want to be a part of that. Let's go a bit overboard, shall we? So the theme for the cosplay competition was fantasy creature. So what did I decide to do? A forgotten robot, because that's totally what they were expecting. Once I'd done a quick little drawing to get my ideas out onto the page, I set about making a start on this properly. I got a large sheet of tinfoil and I wrapped it around half of my head so that I had a rough idea of how big I was going to need to make this to fit me properly. Then I would tape that delicately to my foam polystyrene head that's slightly smaller than mine, and I could start covering it with little scraps of cardboard, getting the vague shape that I needed. After a couple hours, I had enough of the head that I needed that I could put it on and wear it. It didn't look good, but it fit me properly. I was originally thinking of doing this as like how they do it in Marvel, where the back is on a latch so that it can be tighter fitting, but in the end, after enough iteration, I got it to a stage where it perfectly fit my head. Like, there's maybe a centimeter's worth of tolerance, but I can get it enough that it goes shoo. Once I got the basic shape down and it could fit me and it looked good enough, I started work on detailing it, just bit by bit adding this all made out of cardboard. I'm just using cereal box cardboard that you get from like cornflakes, and then a lot of hot glue. Now, I didn't really bother to measure things too hard in this project. There were a couple things I did, like when I wanted to do the visor, I would get a large sheet of cardboard, fold it in half, and then cut it, because that way when I unfold it, it should be symmetrical. But I wasn't too fussed about this because I knew that I was going to be heavily weathering it. It's a forgotten robot, it's been dead for like 500 years or whatever it is. It's going to have some wear and tear. So deliberately making it asymmetrical means it doesn't matter if it accidentally is, because your eye's going to be drawn to the fact that, you know, one horn's shorter than the other, or there's a cut here where there isn't there. Once I had basically everything that I wanted down, I began the weathering part of the detailed weathering. Sure, you can weather stuff with paint and make it all dirty, whatever. I wanted this to have a gnash out the side of it, like something had taken a chunk off the head. And I've actually already done this before on my Spider-Man mask. This isn't one that I've shown on the channel. I might do a quick little short, but I built this before the channel, and so I got to practice that and knew that that technique would work. Now for the visor, you can see that that's solid black. What I did is I took a plastic covered face shield that was going spare, cut it to the correct shape, and then just used a black Sharpie, did lots of lines. Again, I'd done that on my Mandalorian helmet over there, and as you can see, that works. Also before the channel. Kind of playing to my strengths here. Maybe that's a good thing, seeing as I had a week's deadline. That's gonna come back to bite me later, but for now, we're doing fine. So now that I've spent 4 days on this now, getting all the details how I want it, I'm gonna use spackle to smooth the edges, and I'm able to sand that. It's like a sort of thin clay type thing that adheres pretty decently to cardboard. Don't have any footage of that because my room is not well ventilated and spackle's not great when you breathe in particles. So I had to do that outside where I don't have any cameras. Bruh. Now the head is basically done. It needs painting, needs some extra bits. I ended up adding like little bits of moss and stuff growing out of the cracks because forgotten robot. Dead in a forest for however long, it's gonna have stuff growing out of it. That was mostly done. I wanted to do something extra. I wanted to do gloves or robo hands. I started with the right one because I'm right-handed and it was easier. And I made a strong focus on giving it joints. It didn't need to move properly or anything, but it needed to move enough that I could express stuff. I don't just want to be like that 70s Godzilla where he's just got the sculpted hands and he holds the handles. That's not what I want. I also thought it would be fun to do a bit more of a distinction to normal cosplays, and I gave myself permanent Spock hands, so I just have 2 giant fingers and 1 thumb instead of the normal 4. Some of my favourite things that I got to do with this is I made these little sheets, thin sheets of cardboard, that would fill in the gaps, so when I moved my fingers on my wrist, even though you can still see some of the black glove that I'm wearing underneath, it kind of helps cover it a little, makes it look a bit more natural, and it moved with the hand, no extra animatronics or anything, it just worked, so that was cool. A lot of this project I used random various bits and bobs that I had lying around, plastic tubs, fake grass, screws, washers, all these random things I collected to give it this really authentic sort of broken vibe. The right hand came and went pretty easily. It was the left hand that caused me more issues because I wanted it to be a lot more weathered, a lot more damaged, and that required a bit more detail, a bit more work. Now these fingers don't have as much joints, they don't have a bend in the middle, but because of this, actually when I'm wearing them, they're actually easier to use sometimes. Now because this one was more weathered, there was a lot more stuff going on with it, had like a giant crack in the wrist, had lots more like screws bent and stuff. That was really fun to work on. Weathering is like one of my favorite parts of any project. It's why you will never really see a pristine cosplay of mine. Sometimes it happens, but most of the time I enjoy the extra step. So it's basically done. I've spackled the gloves as well so it's smooth. Everything's there. What's next? Painting! Oh. You know that part where I said I had 1 week deadline? I'd kind of assumed that I could paint the entire project in one day, so I'd left it till the last day. Mistakes were made. I started off by trying to give it the base coats. Part of the Aperture Science vibe, I want it to be like a white and black two-tone. White's a little tricky to get a solid coat of. You need like at least 3, maybe 4 till it starts looking consistent. And because I had to use my grey primer to do over the plastic bits, those were harder because the darker patches. It was when it came to painting the weathering. Again, the funnest part normally, but when you're on a deadline, it's tricky. With things like the Cybertron diorama and the Junkion diorama, I've had time to iterate, give it all the different layers it needs that I can rub off and add to give it that nice texture. When I did things like my black wash, it was too dark, it would just mess up the colour. When I tried to do stuff like the dry brushing, it would just have spots on it because I hadn't wiped enough off of it. It was a pain. This was the most stressed I have been in a project in a long time. Yes, except for what I discovered. My best thing that I could have done, which was the sponge. This thing. I mean, sponging's a thing I've known about for a while. This is just a bit of sponge off of that same curved face shield, right? The bit that goes around the headband. This just fixed everything. What I did is I did a white base coat, black base coat. This is after doing 7 failed attempts beforehand, right? So I did those base coats, and then I would get a black wash, like a thinned out black, on the sponge, get rid of most of it, and then pat it on so that it was almost speckled because the sponge is randomized in the divots and whatever. So it gave it a very texture. And then to get it back to that brighter, whiter, grayer color, I would just do the same thing after it's dry, but white. It sounds obvious. It is in retrospect. But I don't care because it worked in the end. So now that it's all finished and I've painted it and everything, the rest of the costume was just essentially a closet costume. I just had this stuff lying around from previous little bits and bobs. So I put all of those together, I got set up, and I went out to the competition, which had been cancelled because nobody else had really bothered, and apparently it was only sort of happening in the first place. It's fine. It's fine. No, it was fine actually, because I got to make this cool video out of it. So with all that out of the way, I think it's time that I show you what I made. That sponging really helped, didn't it? I especially loved that the silver paint made it slightly glittery, so in the right light it just sparkles. Really happy with this, and I hope you enjoyed watching how I made this. I also hope that you like this new setup. No black screen anymore, no Doofenshmirtz. It's a lot easier for me to record, and I think it looks a little cooler, doesn't it? But no, that's been me. Hope you enjoyed. Catch you on the flip side. Bye!